Hey guys, John here. So the biggest question I always get when I do these courses is where can I get access to the source code? So I obviously can't upload that here on YouTube, so I've made that available for you over on BitTorrent. And along with the source code, you'll also be able to actually download the videos to your computer so you can have them forever. So if for some reason something crazy happened and I decided to delete them, or YouTube kicked me off of their site or whatever, it wouldn't really matter for you, because you would have all the source code, you'd have all the videos, everything essentially that I've created for the course you would have on your own computer. So I've created a link in the description where you can find that stuff over on BitTorrent. Please consider going over there, supporting me that way. I'd appreciate that. Also, please consider making a donation here on YouTube using the fan funding. This is how, or one of the ways that I'm able to keep all of the videos that I'm doing and releasing here on YouTube for free, by those who are able to pitching in and allowing me to do that. So please consider that. And if you need access to any of the resources that I use through everything that I do online, coding, releasing videos, etc., you can head on over to johnmorrisonline.com/resources, and I have a whole slew of all sorts of different resources, from hosting to different tutorials and just everything over there that I use. So again, johnmorrisonline.com/resources. All right, on to the lesson.
Hey, John Morris here, and in this video we're going to talk about how to retrieve results from the database. And again, we're going to use both MySQLi and PDO in order to do that. So again, this is when you would want to get some sort of information from the database using a select query. Okay, so we're going to focus mainly on the PHP, although I will cover some of the basic MySQL syntax as well that you might use. But for the most part, this is going to be focused on the PHP of it. All right, so we'll just, again, run quickly through our setup. As always, we have our username we have our database details set up for our username, for our user, our password, our database name, and our host. We are, again, instantiating a new instance of the MySQLi object here. We're passing in our database details. We're checking to see if we're connected. And then what we're starting with new here is we're going to actually run a query on the database. So the method that you would use in this instance is the query method. So MySQLi query. And you can see our query here is we're just selecting all from the objects table. So we're just going to get all of the results from the object table. Now, a lot of you may be wondering about prepared statements. I'm going to cover prepared statements later in another video and show you how to do that with both MySQLi and PDO. However, here I just want to cover the generic queries. In most cases, you'll probably want to use the prepared statements just because it essentially gets rid of the possibility of an SQL injection attack. So if you're using user submitted data especially, you're going to want to use prepared statements. But there also may be times where there will most likely be times where you need to run generic queries where you're not able to bind statements or be able to bind data or prepare statements the way that you do with prepared statements. And it's a situation where you're not necessarily using user submitted data, so you're not as concerned about injection attacks. Okay, so again, there's a possibility, or there's the need to know how to just run generic queries. Plus, I just want to cover it in general for you understanding how to query the database. Okay, so again, the method that we're going to use is the query method, and this is just going to run whatever query we enter into it. So again, select all from the objects table. We're going to get the result. The thing to note about the result is a lot of people think that the result is the actual array of objects or the array of arrays that you get that you would expect from a MySQL database. That's not actually true. The result is actually what's stored in result is a MySQL resource. So if you just do a print R on result, you're not actually going to get your results. You're going to get information about the result set. Okay, so just to give you an idea what that looks like, I'll go ahead and I'm going to comment those out, and I'm going to just do a print R on result so you can see exactly what that looks like. So we'll head over here, we'll refresh, and you'll notice that you're actually getting a MySQL resource, and it's telling you information about the resource, how many fields there are, length, number of rows, etc., etc. Okay, so that really isn't useful for what you're wanting, which is the actual results. So what that means is, the reason I bring that up is because you actually have to fetch the result. And so kind of the standard way of doing this, and if you again worked with the old MySQL, you know that you kind of had to do this for that too, which was to create a while loop. You set a variable row equal to the result of this method, which is in this case fetch object. Now you can do fetch object, you can do fetch array, you can fetch this in whatever format you prefer. I prefer fetching it as an object, so I've used fetch object here, and we're running it on our result variable where the resource is stored. Okay, so that's going to actually fetch the information from the resource, and what we're doing is, again, we're storing the result of that into this row variable, and then we're looping through each row and doing that and storing each row or all of the rows into this results array. Okay, so when we put empty brackets on like this, what that's going to do is, as it loops through, it's just going to add each row to our results array and make it an indexed array. Okay, so what we're gonna end up with is an array of objects. So each row is going to be an individual object, but it's going to be contained within an array, an indexed array. And then we're just printing that out, and then we're freeing up the result. That essentially cleans it up from memory so that we can free up the memory that's used for this query. All right, so that's what we're doing here. Let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. So again, what you'll see here, what I want you to pay attention to is we have an array. That's what we created with our results right here. Okay, that's making an array, and we are then have an array of objects. So our first item in our array, you'll notice it says standard class object, so it's an object, and then it contains all of the information about our first row of information. All right, so that's our first row. Then you'll see here our second item in this array, again, is an object, and it contains information about our second post, or our second row in the database. Just to give you an idea, here's the two rows that I created just for testing. So ID 1 and 2, test 1, test 2, test 2, test 2. Pretty self-explanatory, but that's what we're getting from our database. So we're getting an array of objects. All right, so you need to, again, run this through this while loop and do fetch object or fetch array, whatever you prefer, in order to do that and store the results into array. And now, with this results array, then you can do something with that. That's what you're actually looking for, and you can, loop through that and do with that information what you want to do. All right, so that's how to do it using MySQLi. Now let's go ahead and take a look at PDO. All right, so it's going to look somewhat similar. Again, we're connecting, just like we talked about in the connection video, a new instance of our PDO object, passing in our database details. Again, we're setting this attribute so it'll throw errors as they happen. That's, again, unique to PDO. The new thing that we're going to start with here is our query. So you'll notice that we're running the same query that we were with our MySQLi. The actual SQL statement is exactly the same. And we're using the query method of PDO. So you notice that with MySQL and PDO, they have a lot of the same methods and they work in a lot of the same way. It's really the same basic idea. It's just a matter of what methods to call and how to call them in order to get to where you want to go. So again, we're calling the query method and we're passing in our actual query. As with MySQL, you need to loop through and actually fetch the object from what's returned in your query. Now, the one thing that's different about PDO is that it will actually, when it returns, it's not returning a pointer or a resource. It's actually will return an array, but the problem with it is that one, it's by default it's an array. So if you want an object, you don't have that. Two, it returns both an indexed and an associative array, which can be kind of confusing. So what we actually do is we loop through, we run this while loop. Again, we set row equal to the result of our fetch. You'll notice instead of fetch object, we do fetch, and then we pass in what we want for our result, whether we want an array or an object. So we're calling a method actually in PDO we're telling it that we want to use the fetch object method, okay? So this is going to fetch us an object. We're again storing that. We're looping through and restoring those rows into an array. So we're going to get an array of objects and we're printing out those results. Okay, so if we come over here, you'll notice this is what we had before for MySQLi. If we refresh that, you'll notice it stays exactly the same. We have an array of the exact same objects. So with MySQLi, with PDO, we're getting the exact same information back when we write our queries this way. Okay, so that is, again, how to use or how to query the database to retrieve results using both MySQLi and PDO. Now, I said I want to cover some basic syntax in terms of your SQL statement. So a lot of times when you're running queries, you don't necessarily want or need all of the columns from the database. And it's good practice to only query for the fields that you need, okay? So in this case, let's go ahead and let me just take a look so I can remember. Let's go ahead and query for our ID and post title. All right, so what this is going to do is it's going to just select those fields from the database. So instead of giving us all of them, it's just going to give us those two, and this is the syntax in order to do that. So this is generally what you want to do. This is the best practice for querying so that you're not querying the database for a result set that is larger than what you actually need. That's going to hurt performance. You know, it's going to bog down the server because it requires more resources and so on and so forth. So only query for what you actually need. So that's what we're doing here. If we head over and refresh, you'll notice that now in our object we have the ID and the post title, and that's it. We don't have anything more. So we have a lot more of a concise query here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and add in, let me just double check again. I believe it's post date from our objects. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add in post date. You'll see why in a minute. And again, this is the same. Obviously, this is the SQL statement. So this is the same whether you're using PDO or MySQLi. It doesn't matter. So I'm just going to show you here since we're already in PDO. All right. Now we can do, another thing that we can do is we can limit this. So let's say that we want to select all from, or we want to select those fields from our table, but we want to limit it to one. So we only want one result set. So we can do limit one. We can head over here. Looks like we're getting, oh, looks like I had a typo for This is actually post date, not data. So we'll head back over. All right, and so you'll see that it has just our first result set. Now, again, depending on what your query is, if you only need the first 10 rows, then you want to limit your query to those first 10 rows. You'll only want to query for what you need. Don't grab the whole table of results if you only need the first 10. All right, so that's limit. We can also do some sort of where clause. So where, let's just do ID equals 1 as our where clause. We're going to do limit 1. It's actually the same thing because only the first record is going to have an ID of 1. We can maybe change this to ID equals 2 and then limit it to 1. So if we come over here, we notice that our ID is set to 1. We refresh. Now it's set to 2 because we queried for, put in that where clause where we queried specifically for that ID. Now you can query for any field, so we could actually do post title and we can do test, but when you do queries for and you have a string that you're going to be doing a where clause for, you need to put it in quotes. And actually, whenever I do queries, I didn't notice that before, but I use double quotes exactly for this reason, so that when you put single quotes in here, it doesn't break your code here. So looks like for some reason it keeps changing on me. NetBeans is fun like that sometimes. All right, so let's put this in double quotes. And then let's put this in single quotes. There. All right, so now we're gonna query for the post where the post title is test. That should just be the first one. So it should give us the same result as just doing limit 1. You'll notice that post title equals test, and that's what we get back. All right, so you can do where clauses if your field is an integer that you're testing for. You don't need to use the single quotes, but if it's a string, then you do need to use the single quotes. All right, another thing that we can do is we can order by. So let's go, let's actually get rid of all of this so that we can see the order by. So, all right, so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and add in this order by, and we're gonna go by post date, okay? And this is going to order them by the date. By default, they're going to come ordered by ID. However, we can choose to order them by something different. So we're going to do order by post date. So if we come over here and we refresh this, you'll notice that our first result is actually our number 2 row, or our second row, and our first row is second, because if you look at the dates, we're ordering by the date, and they're both on August 3rd. However, this one's at 11 a.m. and this one is 1400 hours, which is 2 p.m. Okay, so this one actually comes after this one when ordered by date. So that's why we're getting that result back. So that's how you can order by date as well. Okay, so those are some of the basic things that you would do when it comes to how you would structure your actual MySQL queries. Again, I want to keep the focus here on PHP and MySQL, not getting into what would be the endless discussion about how to structure different MySQL queries. But I did want to give you some basic stuff in terms of things that you're going to use most often. And so selecting specific fields, using where clauses, using limit, using order by, those are all common things that you're going to do. Beyond that, if you have some really fancy query like joins and all those different things that you want to do, I would suggest just diving into that when you need it and figuring it out. So that is how to get data from the database, how to retrieve results using both MySQLi and PDO. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and I'll talk to you later.